start this off by everyone's favorite wine clip.
Do not sabotage me. If you want to be a fucking lightweight, then that's your call, but do not sabotage me.
Oh, aye, Captain, you got it.
And if they want to drink Merlot, we're drinking Merlot.
No, if anybody orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I am not drinking any fucking Merlot!
Okay, relax, Mom.
I'm not drinking any Merlot. All right, so this is how we're going to start that. This is how we start. Everyone raise their glass. Raise your glass. Cheers. Clink the camera if you can. That's how we cheers.
Paul Giamatti.
Let's go. Let's start with Danielle's group. So who are your friends that are getting married?
That's us in the background, Ed and Barbara.
Hi.
Are you popping bubble wrap right now?
Yeah. What's your name?
Ed.
Barbara.
Barbara. So Barbara took a sip early before Dan joined, and she went, "Ow, this is good." Did I quote you with the right enthusiasm?
Yeah, it's really good. I love.
Okay. So I'll start with you. What are you tasting when you taste this Merlot?
I tasted blackberries and juice and just lots of fruit. Really
Right.
good.
Blackberry juice. What's everybody else getting? No one's just shout it out.
Pepper.
Pepper.
Love. I taste love.
There's a lot of that in there.
Lot of love.
Mm-hmm.
Lot of love. Anybody else getting things here?
Black currant or something.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Right.
All right. This is so, yeah, we like to, one of the things I like to do, as I said yesterday for people who are on the call and there's some new people, is I like to taste it before hearing about it. So we have this unadulterated taste. For those of you just joining, so Leah, Maria, have you popped the wine? Have you tasted it yet? Cheers.
Yes, I'm tasting Xanax. How's that?
All right, there you go. That is shelter in place there.
A hint of Zoloft. A hint of Zoloft.
Yeah, just I have a
little bit of that got
the
through.
CBD gummy I took earlier. So great stuff. So now we've all had a chance to taste it. I'd like to welcome our special guest, Dan Marioni. Dan is one of the winemakers at the Sonoma Mountain Winery. So Dan, why don't you tell us about this wine?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thanks for the fun words. I think that we all I think we checked the boxes there for Merlot out of any kind of Jancis Robinson book or anything. You know, this is a pretty important wine, I guess, for some of the background on Sonoma Mountain Winery. You know, this has really been a continuation, a bit of an offshoot away from the Coturri winery itself, started by Tony Coturri's son, Nick. And then and I came in 2016. And this vineyard has been there all along. It was planted in the early 90s and by Tony and Phil Coturri. So Phil does all of the beautiful vineyard management, vineyard work, and then Tony has always been making the wine. And this Merlot I believe is planted on St. George. I think you guys went through that yesterday, and which is obviously quite common, but also really stable for us. And with the soil type, I mean, especially good for phylloxera, etc. So this Merlot has like a long-standing history, and obviously one with Sonoma Mountain Winery because it was made from its inception in 2009. Merlot typically, especially in Old Bordeaux, and also in California, is a blending varietal. And in order to have its single varietal on its own and showcased, like Tony and Nick had, the boldness to do, and a lot of winemakers had the boldness to do all throughout the 90s. Up until this famous piece of screenplay that we got to start off this thing with came along. I don't, maybe it was deserved at the time. The point is that I think that it's due for a resurgence. And we have these ones that go back to 2011 is some inventory that I still have, and the acidity and that fruit characteristic and that strong black fruit characteristic that we're talking about and that, you know, people pointed on is still there. Obviously, this is a real treat, I think, to get it as fresh as 2018. And, you know, to me, it is so archetypal of what Merlot is. And not only that, in the vineyard itself is really expressive of black fruit and sort of, you know, kind of powerfully being there. There is a lot of blackberry that is grown there. And it's just kind of interesting to be walking the vineyard and tripping over brambles, and then you have the wine and it just has this brambly quality to it. Not so much in a lot of pyrazine or a lot of green notes, but really just kind of that big blackberry fruit, bit of tightness, and then a little bit of, you know, fruit tannin is all that really comes through, but mostly a larger fruit bomb and with high acid. And, you know, for us, 14.5% alcohol with a bunch of really great fresh acidity and a bit of tannin provides a wine that has absolutely zero sulfur in it and zero filtration or any other kinds of intervention in order to last a while. You know, so these wines, I mean, I think that having 2018 right now, and I think that having it for the next 2 years is pretty ideal. And then after that, it's just kind of a joy to see how it ages.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting, I think, one of the questions that comes up about natural wine a lot is will it age? So how long will this 2018 Merlot age gracefully before falling off the cliff?
Yeah, the whole point of falling off a cliff is an interesting thing. I mean, to be honest, I don't know. If I had to just throw a number out there, I'd say the wine is going to be tasting its best now for the next 4 years. Just make up some number. But, you know, I mean, like, we're still enjoying 2011 Zinfandel that Nick had made, you know, in the past. And actually, you know, it's just an interesting thing just thinking about acid and how important that is for the structure and the stability of the wine. You know, the acidity in that 2011 Zinfandel, somewhat similar for 2012 Merlot and 2011 Merlot, really high acid, really a cooler year. But that wine basically sat around for 9 years, you know, until it started to really relax. And and what I mean by relax, I guess, is sort of open up the rest of its palate. So it's not just a sort of lightning bolt of tight fruit and then a lot of acid. It starts to open up and relax, and that's when you start to get to an actual tasting of a front palate, of a mid, and then a real finish. And so, you know, again, I just to simplify it, you got 3 things for us when you don't have any chemicals. So it's just alcohol, it's booze, it's acid, and it's tannin. And I try to simplify it as much as that. So we pick all based around that. We obviously farm really sustainably and organically, and, you know, manually. I mean, and I think that, you know, with that, we're always going for those points for the best nutrients and its own turnover, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah. I'm not really trying to guide the fruit in a certain flavor direction. I want it to express itself. I just want the fruit to be as healthy as possible. So it has a chance to, you know, it has a fighting chance to actually ferment. It has a fighting chance to actually live, and the wine itself has a chance to survive, you know.
Yeah, I want to do a quick poll by raise of hands, or everyone can use the Zoom emojis, like thumbs up. Like, how many people, and honestly, just raise your hand if you're one of those people who are like, I don't normally drink Merlot, you know, like, just, I don't buy it. Yeah, so it's just, only one person, really? A couple people, yeah. One of those, because there's a lot, a few more coming up. So about half the group I've seen in my gallery view are just like, yeah, they're not Merlot people. It's like it's the red version of people who I think are ABC, which is anything but Chardonnay on the white side. And this is a
never mind. That's Merlot.
This is that wine. When I first met Nick Couturi at a natural cala fermentation natural wine event 4 years ago, and I was like, everyone was pouring these wines, and he was the only one pouring Merlot. I'm like, ah, crap, someone's making Merlot, and I drank it. I was like, this shit is good. And I was like, I need to get to know this guy better because this is amazing. So this is, I mean, I think
Chris, was this the guy they were at in Oakland, the one that we went to, the raw
yes,
wine?
you met him at Brumaire.
They were behind the velvet ropes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So so they poured it. They poured a Brumaire, which is a very big. There's a couple people here who are not in the area. We're not out here. It's a very large natural wine festival every March that a lot of people pour at. So this is just, you know, like I think it's, you know, Danielle's, this is just a fantastic drinking wine. Whether even non-Merlot people are going to like this wine. And it will. This will age for a while. Okay.
Yeah, Cali fermentation. That was one of the first events I think I actually poured with Nick, and you know, that 16 Merlot I think we must have been pouring then. It was really fresh, and I remember commenting about it. And when I worked at Ruby, also, you know, we were just talking about it. You know, that wine was one of the larger factors that made me fully accept the fact that I couldn't go back to my day job. You know, I had to stay and I had to do this, and it was one of the things that, you know, I fell in love with. I mean, especially if you get to the point of being in the vineyard. For me, it was over when it was being in the vineyard and then harvesting fruit and then going and crushing it, you know, with all your friends, and then having the wine after that. It was just one of those things. I was like, I have to figure out how this,
and I'm going to come
how this works.
I'm going to come back to that in a second because I think with this one. But Danielle, Ed has a question. What's your question, Ed?
Yeah, I had a question about the comments on acidity, and Dan was saying it's, you know, big acidity. What does that mean, like quantitatively? Like how big a range is there in measuring acidity, and is it just like the chemical acidity that you're literally just measuring that, or is there more to acidity than that?
Yeah, for sure. So there are a couple measurable ways, I guess, or, you know, lab tests that, you know, winemakers will go out and look for. There is total or titratable acidity. And so we're talking, it's a combination of different acids and different alpha and beta acids. But essentially there's a combination of, I mean, mostly acetic acid. I mean, and a lot of chemists would say the only thing that makes wine what it is, the only difference between water is that it's water with acetic acid in it. I mean, other than that, I mean, as far as parts per million thing, it wouldn't be that much. But these things are measured in grams per liter. Another important term, and especially in the natural wine world, is volatile acidity, which it will come up a lot and people will call VA. And that's, again, measured in grams per liter. There is technically a legal standard with how high you can go with volatile acidity, or VA. And that number is 1 gram, basically 1 gram per liter. There are definitely wines that are probably on the market that go above that number. And some of them are probably some of my favorite, you know, wines that you can get at some natural wine shops.
Yeah.
It's not really something that's really enforced, but I guess my point is that it can be quantitative, right? And it's not always a subjective thing. And so a lot of times, and especially for me in the winemaking style, I'm very sensorial. I like some numbers, but I don't want to spend a lot of money and a lot of time overthinking numbers. I'm going off of intuition and taste and flavor, and most importantly, balance, because it's about balancing those 3 things also that I was talking about, between balancing acid and alcohol and fruit. You know, if you have something that's just a fruit bomb that's 12% alcohol, I think, you know, it can come off just a little chubby. It's kind of Kool-Aid, you know, and so it needs to have some acid and some backbone to it.
I like it, chubby and Kool-Aid. So I want to get
chubby
back. Did anyone else have a question?
I want to ask.
Go ahead.
Was 2018 the fire year?
17.
17. Okay.
Yeah.
17 and 19 were the fire years.
19, so 18.
Yeah.
And 19
was
not so much, you know.
18. This year was pretty dreamy. I mean, as far as ripening, temperature, you know, I mean, yeah, 17 was the big fire year, especially in Glen Ellen where we are. A lot of houses were burned down, and the whole place was on, lockdown and all that. And so it was a really crazy story, really crazy time, but also a really special vintage for that reason. And not only just personally, but I mean, all of our wines survived, and we didn't have a lot of smoke taint, which was a huge issue in the wine country. We actually had our last crush the day the 17 fires started. That was Sunday, October 9th, I think, 8th. And and so we had everything crushed. So there was obviously a lot of active fermentations going on that we weren't allowed to get to. And I could talk, we could have a whole nother, we could do a whole podcast about that one, But anyways, 18 was a glorious,
and we will.
18 was a glorious year. Yeah, for sure. So both really great years.
Yeah. So I want to get back to you made the comment earlier that the 2016 Merlot was the wine, because everyone talks about what was that bottle that changed you and made you get into the wine business or do something like that. So Dan, like the 2016 Merlot was when you said, I got to get out of my day job. So I want you to share what your day job was before saying, I'm quitting this terrible, awful company that's not going to go anywhere, and I'm going to go make wine. So what were you doing? Exactly. What were you doing before you decided to move back to Sonoma and make wine?
Yes, I went to school. I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I got a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. And I only wanted to do automotive engineering, and I only really wanted to work at Tesla. So I ended up, luckily, somehow, ended up working at Tesla for about 5 years. And, by the time I had lived all over the Bay and was kind of losing my mind and in a complete, manic spiral, I, and my best friend, Alan came up just to me. He's like, you just come up and make wine with us. We're just going to be making wine for the weekend. It's going to be great. And then I did. And then I think that weekend, I offered Nick $50, to buy his wine company, and everyone just said, careful what you wish for. And then, fast forward a couple of years, here we are. It was one of those things. I think that might've been the day that we were crushing Merlot. It might've been. And, it's literally the first day I went up there, I just knew that I wanted to be up there as much as humanly possible. So for a while I was doing both. And then I finally, after the fires happened here, I had finished a sabbatical that I went on, and I just I went back to a corporate office, and I couldn't handle it, and I just kind of quit right after that, and then came up. And, it's kind of being from Sonoma, obviously kind of fourth generation has a big influence on that. And this is a beautiful place to live. And if you can do it in a very interesting, never, kind of like where you need to wear a lot of different hats, that's kind of, what I have always been into. And this is definitely a job where you have to do that. There was actually another wine in 16. Really, having fresh Côte de Caillou wines, which is definitely, I think at some point we should have one of these things with Jacques on it.
Jacques, yeah.
Because that would be a trip. But he has estate Rhone varietals grown in sort of really close to actually downtown Sonoma, but more on the Mayacamas side, so a little warmer Sonoma Valley. Not too long of a history, or explanation, but basically tucked in between two hillsides, and we're Sonoma Mountain, and then Mayacamas is on the other side, and which divides.
So explain Mayacamas for people who are not native to the Sonoma.
Yeah.
Just really quick.
So basic. Yeah, so wine country itself, I guess we could divide up into Napa and Sonoma, Mendocino, Petaluma, Sonoma Coast. Just simple, but of course everyone knows Napa, and then it's obviously next to us, Sonoma. The thing that divides those two places, and which has a huge impact on climate and on vineyards grown as you move east away from the coastline, are these mountain ranges. And so the Mayacamas mountain range is what divides Napa Valley from Sonoma Valley.
Yeah, you will hear if you talk to people who make wine in the valleys, you will hear people reference what side of the Mayacamas they're on or what slope they're on. And he's talking about Cotacayu. Cotacayu is on the western slope of the Mayacamas. So that is a very common phrase that you will hear from winemakers up here, which is specifically the mountain range. So it's not just Sonoma or Napa. It's like, where are you? What side of the Mayacamas are you on? Are you in the valley or are you in Sonoma Mountain? Sure. It's the terroir gets that specific.
Yeah, definitely.
How's that company Tesla working out without you?
I left them in good hands.
You left them in good hands. Yes.
I think it was good that I guess they fired a lot of the people that I worked with. Maybe that was a good thing.
Yeah. So I want to, I've been very fortunate actually for this wine to actually visit the vineyard earlier this year with Dan and David, who's the farmer there, and takes care while they were pruning. And so this particular wine, in terms of being Merlot, is a beautiful wine. I love it, but it's also something that I'm going to be following this vineyard specifically and the farming techniques for the entire year. So I do want to share a couple videos here on this particular vineyard. This is from this is just from the it's from my phone.
Walking up to this guy.
Dave. So what he's doing is pruning.
I can already see that's my spur. This is my cane on this side.
Okay, and there's more. I'll play one more.
And no spur on this side then? No spur on this side. Okay. And trim up.
And actually, since it's only 1 minute, I'll play one of the last ones.
All right, that one was a little bit more complicated. That's taking about a minute.
Yeah.
And one of those for each one of these.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, and there it is. So what you look at here, which I find amazing, is one of the things that's very special about natural wines is that most of them are farmed by hand. And every vine stock they go up to, they look at and they see they have to make 5 or 6 decisions in about 5 seconds. Because they're going to cut off everything else and leave just 2 spurs, 2 canes, and then tie it down. They make all the decisions in 5 seconds. They cut everything else off, and that takes about a minute per vine, and then they move on. And you see in a vineyard, how many vines are in that vineyard, Dan?
Probably, close to 2,000. We're going to actually walk it and count everything.
Yeah, so they're going to walk it and count it. So one of the things that I'm doing with this vineyard, which is really special, is that they pass through this vineyard, and we'll count it up to this year 5 or 6 times a year. So they pass it once to do the pruning, then they do the tying, then they'll walk through and they'll do pruning throughout the year, and then they'll do collection. So one of the things that you see is that there are 5 decisions per vine, 2,000 vines. Just in the pruning phase, 10,000 decisions are going into that part. And then 4,000 ties, and then all of these other things. The amount of work that goes into bringing this grape to this glass by hand is really impressive. And this particular vineyard, I have visions that this is going to be some type of infographic of all the data and the numbers and the work that goes into bringing this to here in this set. So I'm very fortunate to be able to live close enough to go and visit these. So it's a very special vineyard.
Yeah, that's our favorite, Yeah, thanks for, recognizing that. That's my favorite time of year, though. We only get to prune, I guess I should say. We only get to prune really once a year, and it is important, and it truly is. To me, I think that a lot of winemakers, they'll talk about being like an artist and working in the cellar, but I mean, there's so many decisions that are made throughout the year that affect how this wine is going to come out. I mean, you can see in that video the way that we're pruning. That's called cane pruning. There's actually it just to research later on, or like if because I don't know, we're all kind of probably not going to be so into reading technical books, but Guildsom YouTube channel is actually decent, and they have a pretty decent just intro into pruning, and it just talks about different styles. But I mean, really the way that they describe it in that video is pretty on point, which is, you're not looking at the present. I mean, you have the present, but you're also looking at wood and at structure that has taken 20 years and 20 years plus sometimes to get to that point. And that decision that you're going to make is going to affect the next year and then affect the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. Like you can really screw up a vine if you just go in there and just start hacking away at it. And so it just really makes me really like, really proud and kind of humbled by some of these guys who can go into these vineyards and just burn through. These guys are fucking amazing because they're making those decisions really rapidly and in essence perfectly, if you wanted to get down to it. It's a really important time.
Yeah. So
what was that one more time?
Brian has a question.
You have to make it so rapidly. Make decisions so rapidly.
Because it's just cost and time. It's skilled labor. And then there's no way that just David and I could do, right now we're managing 3 vineyards. And so there's only a certain window to prune. This year was interesting because it got, I don't know if we all really noticed, but the rains really kind of stopped earlier than I would have liked. Did not rain as much as any farmer I think would have liked. But there's that certain window right after it's really cold, or after winter and moving into spring and before bud break happens, where you need to get all your pruning done. And so you only have a certain amount of time, and there's only so many hands and only such a brain, that can handle it.
Yeah. So to put that in perspective,
speed is money, time is money again, but also time is money, and to do it very well is really impressive.
Yeah, because 2,000 vines, 2,000 vines at a minute a vine is close to 35 hours of work. So 2 people doing that, it takes Dan and David, it takes them, multiple days to do that, and they're managing multiple vineyards as well. And he mentioned like you only have limited time to do it between January and February. There are rains, there are other things, and you have to get it done before bud break. So we can get into bud break if nobody has any questions about the wine or anything. Let's put a pin in bud break for a minute, because Dan, one of the things I want Dan to talk about is Dan works for Tony Coturri and Coturri Winery, and Tony is a very Tony has been doing natural wine is a big trend now, and it's a big thing now, but the Coturris have been doing this natural wine thing, as I say, since 1974. So Dan, can you talk a little bit about Tony Coturri and what's it like to work with him and his philosophy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, working with Tony is, I mean, it's been pretty mind blowing. What can I say? The guy is obviously a character, but to carry this torch for so long and against such odds. I mean, when you could imagine him pouring no sulfite wine in 1989, and the wine maybe doesn't have the right color capsule on it, that he would get laughed out of a store, because it's just at such a time where wines had to reflect such a state of like French, either aesthetic, color combination, text, font, writing, script, or parts of Italy, obviously, especially coming from Northern California, when if you were breaking away from that, I mean, you're just kind of a joke. And then especially to have even the term organic, I think, was taboo. Even if people were talking about farming organically, they were just looked at as a bunch of hippies, who are just, again, sort of like laughed out. But you know, Tony always found a way to keep a niche following, and you know, which I think put him up, you know, sort of 40 years later, I think, to get, you know, at least put into the hat, you know, for a James Beard Award. I think that was a year or 2 years ago, and obviously didn't win it. But you know, it's just like this thing. I have no idea really how he was able to keep this business operating and running. But I'm extremely grateful, obviously, for having the opportunity to work with them, and to get into that philosophy and into that practice, you know, and start to understand, and especially break away from my background, where I love efficiency and I love numbers and I like making predictable outcomes become a reality. I like Six Sigma philosophies and stuff like that. So, and I had to throw all that away and start to learn how to, you know, use more intuition, sensory things, sight, smell, taste, everything, and then really just like a gut feeling. And you know, that is the sort of, you know, extreme romanticism and sort of side, and also just to be so, you know, kind of stern and so, I mean, focused on what his, you know, requirements are, which is at the end of the day, no chemicals. You don't need this, and appreciating the natural cycles of the earth, on, sustainability and practice. And I think, you know, he definitely deserves a tip of the hat, if not more, for being very, very consistent on that point and never really giving in. Obviously,
Yeah.
he's had,
So tell
you know,
us
some help along the way, and a lot of people have given a lot of time, you know, working up there and helping that cause live on.
Yeah. So so we have you know, in this series of 6 California natural winemakers, everyone has a slightly different philosophy. Some of the philosophies are the same. This bottle contains grapes and nothing else. So then, like, what is the magic? Tell us how this wine is made.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just a really good way to put it. Like, and I think that, I don't know if I did it on this label, if I changed the back, but yeah, there's just to cover that one point, in ingredients and ingredients labels in wine. This is really a thing that I think, especially, may change with all this stuff that we have going on, but, and the sort of attrition that's going to happen with this thing. But yes, ingredients are just grapes. And I think that you could tell, really what I want to do is farm these grapes and then just put them directly into bottle almost as much as I can. So to the winemaking side of it, all of this fruit is picked at a certain combination of really sugar, ripeness, flavor, taste. If you could imagine going through the vineyard and picking berries as you go along throughout the rows, and you just test them for taste and sugar and pH, which is really just a measure of its acid. And so all those things get thrown into a brain, and then that brain says picking now, picking not now, et cetera, et cetera. And once everything is picked, all manually harvested, we of course get help with that. They're all picked in what we call FYBs, which are, pardon, you know, my language, but are fucking yellow boxes. That's their actual term, because they're really not nice to deal with, because they're injection molded plastic. They have sharp edges, and you have to pick 30 to 40 pounds of fruit in them and then carry them out of the vineyard, you know, one by one, and we stack them all up. The reason why we do this is because when fruit is all just thrown into these big vats and into half-ton picking bins, which you can see everywhere around the wine country during harvest, you know, that weight of the fruit will actually begin to crush it on its way to the winery. So it will actually press down and begin breaking fruit skins. It'll begin, you know, separating fruit and bleeding juice, which exposes the fruit to bacteria, obviously, and oxygen, probably mostly. That's a dangerous kind of combination. And so we like to pick things in FYBs, which are the small boxes, to keep them kind of secure and safe. And they're taken directly to the winery and then just crushed, destemmed, especially with our reds. So the Merlot in this case, everything is destemmed. None of this is, I guess, macerated or fermented with stem. Especially in 2018, I'll focus on 2018. that's just a winemaking decision. And again, I want to go as fruit forward as possible and not have other additions into it. Stem can be considered a bit of a flavor addition and a bit of a tannin and greenness and flavor changer thing. So everything is destemmed, so it's just crushed fruit, crushed berries that all go into big bins, larger bins. These are full ton macro bins or fermenters, open top fermenters. And then as it ferments, there's a large cap that's formed of just skins, and then those are all manually punched down. That's the term punch down. So if you've ever heard of the wine bar called the punch down or that term before, that's what they're talking about. It's the actual process during fermentation of pushing the skins back in and really macerating the wine. That's how red wines get their color. That's how red wines extract nutrient for fermentation. Again, color, pigment, and that's how they get also tannin structure, tannin chains develop. After fermentation, so all of the yeast has, consumed all the available
so
sugar.
Dan, I'm gonna cut you off
It's
there.
probably a good time to break.
Yeah, you're gonna get too. I just want to. I just want you to do the bullet point version, because there's a lot of people that talk about, unfined, unfiltered, and all this other stuff, or SO2. But basically, what you all do is you pick the grapes, you let them naturally ferment. There's nothing added. There's no fining. There's no filtering. There's no SO2, and you bottle them. And that's it. It's the most pure form of wine there is. Would that be correct?
I think so. Other people would argue. I guess the best way to answer that is to give someone an idea of what typically happens if they're having a conventional Merlot.
So what's happening here is that, for example, we had Broc Cellars on yesterday, and they add a little SO2, and there's a couple other people, who the other producers are. Some of them add SO2, some of them do different things. But this idea is they do nothing. This is grape juice with natural yeast that ferments and gets bottled. That's it.
Yeah.
So now I want to get to the question that Mark asked. Mark asked one of my favorite questions about natural wine. Does natural wine mean no hangovers?
No. I know this from extensive research. But the reason why, and I think that the really good thing to point out is that, first of all, wine has alcohol in it. Alcohol is going to dehydrate you. If you are not careful with consuming alcohol, you will have a hangover for sure. I can pretty much guarantee it. What I would say, and what I argue, is that it's just a different hangover. If you have 2 glasses of this Merlot, I really have no idea how you could have any type of a hangover. There are definitely wines out there, if I have 2 glasses of it, I will for sure have a hangover from it. And that is because, and the way that I think about this obviously is, I'm not exposed. I don't drink any other wines really. So I don't drink any conventional wines or anything that has sulfites in them. Spare some. Obviously I taste a lot of wine, taste through a lot of wines. But, as far as just consuming and drinking more than a couple of glasses, it might be a bit of a rarity for me. But again, it's still a product that has alcohol by volume. So there definitely will still be hangovers. But the thing to point out, I think, is that certain people have a very distinct reaction to sulfites. And I think that everyone has different opinions about this, from what I can tell. But I think that I do, and I think that I also have a different buzz if I'm drinking conventional wine than I do if I'm having natural wine. I feel sluggish, I feel flush in the face, and I feel almost like a lightheaded sensation, more so than an actual alcohol induced drug. Great. Essentially, you know what I'm talking about.
So I'm going to send So one of the things that I can say that they've actually done this double-blind study. Part of Mark's question is that they've done a double-blind study about wine that's made naturally versus conventionally, and how it's absorbed in the system. I will put that link in the meeting updates. This is the only virtual tasting, by the way, that's meeting updates that I know of.
Wow.
It is absorbed. And one of the things they have shown is that natural wine, the study in Italy, is absorbed differently in the body. It does result in lower BAC, lower drunkenness, and which also I think does correlate to probably not as much of a hangover. By the way, as a wine company, we're definitely not allowed to market "this won't give you a hangover." We're definitely not allowed to do that. If Miller Lite cannot even market "won't slow you down," we cannot say that you won't get a hangover. But Tom has a
forgiveness, not permission. This is the
yeah.
new
So Tom,
17% alcohol.
Yeah. So Tom has a question on sulfites, which is the big bugaboo in the natural wine world. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, it's more of maybe a noob wine question, but I'm wondering why do sulfites get added to wine in the first place for a lot of those conventional ones?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really important question to understand, right? I mean, just right off the bat of why am I drinking natural wine, or why am I drinking this wine, and what the hell's in it, and what does it do? I was just going to get to the point when I was talking about, and really I'm trying to really lock this in so I don't just drawl on, but like right at crush, like right when we bring fruit in, it's and by textbook, even textbook going back to the old, monks when they were starting to discover sulfur and sulfur additions into wine, it is still almost step like 101 to crush fruit, add sulfite, add sulfur in some kind of a stabilizing way. The reason is for microbial introduction, for any risk of contamination with flaw producing, off flavor producing, sulfur hydroxide, whatever is going to be, producing compounds that can get into the juice. Juice is kind of fragile at this point. It is sugar, it is water essentially, and bacteria and things that are alive and that are metabolizing stuff love this. They love this shit. And so a part of what the sulfur is doing, it's killing off these bad bacteria. It's also killing off other bacteria. It's sort of, in my mind, similar, and I could be totally wrong. Whatever. I'm not a doctor, okay? But I imagine it as like taking antibiotics, and I imagine it killing off a lot of things. So also, what sulfites are is an antioxidant, and so obviously this juice is exposed and sitting in air, which is I think somewhere around 23% oxygen, and it being exposed to oxygen is browning that juice, is changing the color of the juice. It is totally having an effect on it, and that is another reason for people who really, really care about the color of their wine, especially for white wines. Like step one is like crush all your white fruit. If you wanted to make wine this way, if you wanted to direct press it, crush all the white fruit, add blah 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 X amount of potassium metabisulfite, whatever it is, just dust it all over, because you have flies there. It's hot, it's summer, and there's everything. And it's sort of amazing, that with all these things and like all of these kind of like, terrors that are kind of thrown out in this sort of like conventional understanding of how wine is made. It's like we've just been crushing fruit and fermenting it, and it turns out great. You know what I mean? And it's like without having to add all that. It's like, is that really necessary, or is it really, to a point? And I think that's the larger question. It is just common practice, standard practice. Someone told you to do it, and then you just do it. So, but there are a lot of producers who, have challenged that and really, really try to minimize it as much as humanly possible, because they do understand some of these side effects from that chemical.
For a lot of people, I think it's a preservative as well. It's like, it's one of those things. It's like, why do canned goods last for 50 years on a shelf, or like, why do you want to have a Twinkie, or do you want to have a freshly baked pastry? It's like it's an antimicrobial preservative. It's one of those like, what are you putting into your body? Are you putting in preservatives into your body? That's really what you're doing in those conventional wines.
That was my
Yeah,
next
and
question,
I
because I was going to say that
right.
the sulfite sounds pretty helpful and pretty good, and then I was like, well, why do you take it out then? So that answers
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Because like with every medication, right? It doesn't just kill the bad cells; it kills some of the good ones too.
Yeah. And so I guess to that point, you know, the reason, and I think one of the technical reasons why I don't like to do it is because I think that there are bacteria that are present at crush which do a lot of metabolic work that can be removed at that stage. And so certain parts of fermentation and some flavors that are produced there and some different strains, I think, could be wiped out. I mean, another point to, I guess, consider is a stage of fermentation called malolactic, which is often frozen or stopped with another addition of SO2. This is a super common practice, especially in white wines. I'm not saying it's going to kill you. I don't think obviously this is fine. Millions of people do this. I just technically don't want to do it because I like the experience, and I like the wine guiding itself through its own metabolic process. And I think that it has its own expression at the end of the day. It's not me intervening. It will naturally go through that process. I want my wines to go through malolactic. I think it's again, a natural process of the wine for it to go through. So I don't have any interest in sort of like getting in the way of that. I think that the flavor compounds and structures, and especially developed over time, and especially developed in bottle, are unique. And I think that they're unique to every vintage. And I like that about the wine. You know, what I mean is, it's not that I don't expect every vintage to taste the same. But there are wineries that is their goal. That is the goal. Yeah. And you need to intervene, I think, in order to make that happen. It's definitely not our goal.
How many people's bottle is empty right now, like mine?
Not even close.
Hang your
started kind of late, so we're still doing okay.
Not yet, but we started with bourbon, so.
Work tomorrow.
It's perfect.
I still have one glass left, but this is a dangerous wine. This is a dangerous wine.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah, because when people talk about crushable, this is a 14.5% alcohol wine. The wine we drank yesterday was 11.5. That was,
yeah.
I drank half that bottle and did a 2-hour presentation in Malaysia last night. This one, I may be in bed by 8 o'clock tonight, but this wine is a dangerous wine because this is crushable and high in alcohol, right? This is
So to me, the only things that like slow you down with these wines are just the alcohol content itself. And so that's the other thing I guess to understand, not to be on a stump, but it's just like the only thing that's really going to be slowing you down and is going to be the booze in this. I mean, be careful though. Sometimes this will give you an energy spike. It'd be like a shot of espresso and a biscotti. You never know. Merlot has a way of doing that. It can turn around on you.
Chris, I want you to get to my question.
Oh, sorry. What was your question? Was it in the chat? Did I see it?
Yes. So about the skins, Dan, we just because we live near Alexander Valley and we buy wine from Raffinelli, they've kept the Italian tradition from the first generation of the 1800s to keep the skin during fermentation. Mm-hmm. And it definitely adds a different complexity. So I was just wondering, do you keep the skin or not? Does natural wine require it? Or I don't know, I'm just asking probably dumb questions.
No, no such thing as dumb. There's a lot. That's why we're here. There's no such thing as dumb question, Amelia. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested by that in the term "keep the skin." Does that mean after they press the wine, do they keep the skin? Do you know that?
Yeah, it says on the label unfiltered wine, and Mr. Raffinelli told us that it was his great grandfather's tradition to keep it in. So they've always done it. They've like, now it's women who run the winery, his 3 daughters, and they've just kept that tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting if they actually like hold on to the skin. What I was imagining from winemaking perspective is that they have extended time on the skins. So I guess what that would mean, this is all, and again, it has nothing to do with making natural wine. This is just winemaking in general. But I was imagining that they have extended what is called a winemaking term, maceration. And maceration is all skins. That's just time that the juice has been soaking on skins and has been breaking it down. It's a common practice for some winemakers to leave the skins in that juice for an extended maceration. To give you perspective, for the Merlot, this is probably 14 days for a full fermentation. So that means all the time it's sitting on those skins. But it's very common I think especially in northern Italy, again, to have extended maceration time. So up to 30 days, up to 60 days. And even now for some white wines that are being made, to have extended maceration times of up to 90 plus days of just time just sitting on skin. So I mean, that's kind of what I imagine, if that would be the most like winemaking relevant maybe point to that.
But
we don't do that, but
let's differentiate though between, so maceration is when they press the grapes and get juice and let the skins and the juice hang, and the skins have some yeast on them and put a lot of color in, right? But eventually the skins are removed from the wines, but are not removed like the juices. But there's a difference between not having the skins and filtering, right? So this is where this wine is unfiltered. Does not mean that there's skins in it. So Dan, maybe you can talk about how you get wine that doesn't have a bunch of, it's not orange juice with pulp. So how do you get the wine that's unfiltered?
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So I'll just talk about again what we do versus kind of maybe what is standard practice. But when people are talking about an unfiltered wine, they need it at some point to press their juice and get all that wine out and get it into barrel. There is typically another step before bottling a wine, and especially for whites and for rosés. It's becoming more common for red wines to be unfiltered around here, at least, and I hope that happens more. But anyways, they will actually pump the juice at a higher pressure through a series of, there are lots of different types of filters, okay? But there's parallel plate filters. So they're pushing the juice up and through certain orifices, which take out sediment. So it's basically removing sediments that have bonded together and to create more color or to create different pigments, but mostly to remove lees and remove certain particulates from the wine, because people don't want to see chunks of anything floating in their bottle or in their glass. That would just be a faux pas. So it's a very common practice to filter that out. It's also, and to a way different level and degree, common to even do reverse osmosis on wines. So to really get down into the biological level, into the microorganism level, and to remove everything from its juice after fermentation, after you have alcohol, and separate as much biomass and as a much physical particulate as possible, before it goes into bottle. And again, these are common practices of sort of industrialization of winemaking, but I think also of trying to, maybe that's the same, but trying to make it stable and trying to make it predictable and look a certain way. So what we do is none of that. We don't do any of that. we press all the juice into a barrel, and then we take all the juice that's in that barrel, and then we bottle it. We just put it directly into a bottling machine. We don't put it through any other inline filtration, any other reverse osmosis, any other chemical introduction, or anything else. So we basically have made the simplest process that you possibly can for making wine. I mean,
so why doesn't this have a bunch of crap in it floating around? Why is this?
Yeah, wines will naturally sort of, I guess, filter themselves. It's a process of dropping sediment in the wine, which happens in barrel. And so there are lots of ways to clarify or to fine a wine before filtering it. And we don't do any of them either, because again, this process just gets back to the point of, you're removing maybe good things with quote unquote bad things. But as a wine sits in a barrel, it will naturally separate. Heavy stuff is going to sink to the bottom, and then all of your juice and your wine will remain at top. Above that. And so that's the only kind of filtering that happens. It happens naturally. So hence the term natural keeps on coming back into this. That's why I think that the community fights for that name, because these processes really just happen on their own. We're just moving them from vessel to vessel, so that's just it. So we press everything, all the juice goes into a barrel, it separates, and then we take all the clean juice on top and we put that in a bottle.
Yeah, which is what I love.
I really don't want to make it as boring as possible.
It's as simple as that, because we've all heard the phrase "the cream rises to the top," right? The cream rises to the top in milk because that's the sweetest, best part. It naturally, by density, separates, and that's what happens in natural. Right. That's what happens in like some people who don't have if you're doing conventional winemaking and you don't have the patience to wait for the cream to rise to the separator, even if you're thinking about cooking using a fat separator or something like that, you run it through processes. Yeah. Natural winemaker, just let the shit sit in the barrel. It'll naturally separate. The stuff you don't want will go to the bottom, and you bottle the stuff on the top. It really is that simple.
I mean, that's how winemaking, was obviously from the beginning. I mean, that's what Greeks were doing. That's what Romans were doing.
That's also the other phrase, that the opposite phrase of the cream rises to the top usually is when you're going to your last resort, is you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. That's where that phrase comes from, is you're getting all the crap left over at the bottom. It's not crap. It's just not stuff that you really want. So cream rises to the top, bottom of the barrel. This is what unfiltered really means.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just saying that we don't use some other machine in the middle of that process to pull out other particulate. That's really it.
So there's been a lot of activity in the chat. If I missed any questions, just raise your hand or shout it out. Take yourself off mute.
I have a question. And Chris, I think I'm going to ask this question at every one of these tastings, because
go for it.
That's what drew us to this, is that, so you're a California-based winemaker. Do you have a tasting room that we can visit when all of this is over?
We do not have a tasting room in Sonoma. What we do, we do allow appointment-only visits up to the winery.
Okay,
that is okay, and that is legally, that is allowable. Yeah, and we actually have a couple different kind of. Well, we have two sites that we're kind of working on. We're to host people, so sometimes we can go up to the old winery, and then we have another off-site facility that we use also, where we have a bunch of wine.
So I
think that's a really good question. I mean, it's quite hard to get a tasting room in Sonoma these days, for small producers. So
it's a great question. I'm actually going to piggyback on that a little, because Mickey, you gave me an idea after yesterday's tasting, is that one of the things that I think we can do, if there's interest in it, is we can actually have some in-person Leporellos meetups and bring this group, whoever wants to go, to the wineries. So as Dan mentioned earlier, Kota Cayu as well, is we can organize. I'm happy to do it. This is one of my favorite things to do. Why I'm got into this business, is go up to Sonoma Mountain, visit where they are there, even go visit another one at Kota Cayu, find some place to have a pizza party at the ranch and kind of hang out. There's a good chance you will probably be encouraged to play pétanque as well, but that's just sort of like a cultural hazard. But that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I mean that sounds great because Bridget and I love like making new friends and like forging new relationships, and that's something that we've been suffering a lot during this time, not being able to do that. So if
We agree. Yeah.
if we can make some new friends, even if we can meet up on the back end of this, that would be good.
Totally cool. That's exactly. I mean, look, that's why we're doing this. We're doing this to. So Mark is asking Dan, how do they make appointments? When this is all over.
Oh, yeah. So you can go to SonomaMountainWinery.com. So it's Sonoma MTN as the label.
I'll send a link in the recap tomorrow so they can do that. Also, Danielle asked, why did they only get one bottle of wine in this 6-pack? Because there were.
I saw that one.
So
it's a really good question.
So Danielle, you can go right to. So Dan, with his engineering background, put together the Sonoma Mountain Winery online shop in a weekend a week ago. How long ago did you do that?
Quarantine work. That was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
awesome, thank you. We'll connect your website.
So you can go online and order directly from there as well. That's a good place to get more wine. But yeah, when this is all over, I'm going to start sending out some emails for, I think, some in-person meetups. I would really, the people who have supported, Leporellos for this, the people who are in the area, it'd be really great to go to the wineries as a group together.
Yeah.
We already met Dan, get there and find this stuff out. I think that would be really a fantastic way to cap this. Yeah.
Everybody check out the chat.
Yeah. When
it's all over.
Yeah. When is it over?
Yeah.
When is
it all over? Yeah.
You guys have an ETA on this? Because
you're not having ETA.
I don't know.
So one of the
I mean, honestly, it hasn't changed that much, but
yeah. Okay. So that's. I know you're not Stephanie. So what's your?
I'm Lauren, my roommate.
Lauren.
Hi, and I'm Stephanie.
Hi,
So
Lauren.
sorry we were late. We were late. We got the wrong time. But one of the questions that got forgotten was Mel and Allen's, which was, does natural wine make you stronger? And I feel like that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I say that with a confident yes. I say yes.
Does it make you stronger?
Yeah. I say hell yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's a real thing. I think that the future of natural winemaking will be having muscle calendars, something like that. Maybe more.
We would subscribe. We'll take that muscle calendar.
Yeah. It's definitely that idea has been tossed around the winery for years, and I think it's about time.
I have had requests to commingle virtual natural wine tasting with high impact training as well. So
for sure,
that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure I like that. I have
your rest period is.
I don't know. I think you might figure something out there.
Yeah, I mean, we could also we could put caffeine into alcohol also and bring back sort of that Four Loko time, where we had the best of both worlds, and then just throw a little bit of CrossFit in there also, or some Peloton.
Yeah, that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
That is the whole idea. So I will send out, as you know, meeting notes, how to contact them for tastings. But when this is all over, we will start to circulate. I think a Leporellos meetup at these wineries and these tastings would be a lot of fun.
It would be, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Come to Sonoma.
Come to Sonoma.
We'll see you.
Beautiful Sonoma Valley.
Yeah, I would like to just go to the town that's next to me right now. Sonoma will do.
What did you say?
No, I'm just gonna.
Chris, so the next one is Sunday?
Yes, the next tasting will be Sunday. The next tasting is with Subject to Change. So
all right, I'll be there.
Yeah, you'll be there. So there'll be so yes, we have tastings next week. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Friday are the last 4.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Well, these have been great, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
You're getting all the heavy hitters out of the way first. You're getting like the
Well, I mean,
14.5%
we're on the East
stuff
Coast,
out
so
of the
we
way.
started with a little bit of bourbon first. So
Yeah,
it's a
Right,
good,
there's a few
it's a
people
wonderful
here.
blend. We've had
good idea.
So for some context, there's a few people here from the East Coast. So Brian and Tracy and Maria,
Jay Henschel over here.
and Jay. So it's 8:30
His
for them.
shoulder.
Now it's 9:30. They started their happy hour a couple hours ago. So they
Yeah,
they're a little,
that's definitely my
Some of
bedtime.
us on the western
Started at 11:30 a.m. You guys were like just waking up.
No CrossFit, not for us.
background makes us think it.
Yeah.
right on. Fantastic.
All right, guys. So we'll see you on. Wait, what's the next one?
Sunday.
Sunday. All right, cool.
The next one.